Greetings, ladies and metal-gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called The Price of Power, written by Destroyer Matron Mark 8.
We don't need to know this.
Zachary stood straight, tiny face scrunched up in the fiercest scowl that he could muster.
We have computers in our heads.
Mrs. Adams gave the young man a level gaze. It was true. Mod Tech had reached the point where every human shared brain space with a supercomputer. Zachary and the other children had been upgraded in the womb, allowing more powerful augments than anything an adult body could accommodate. The boy was only 6, but his strength and speed already outstripped that of an healthy adult. Yes, she allowed, we have computers in our heads. The boy opened his mouth, but she cut him off before he could press his point. Do you want your computer to make all of your decisions for you?
Yeah.
Zachary kept his skull in place. Oh, really? Mrs. Adams hadn't planned on making this particular demonstration so soon, but the boy's willingness to submit to his brain orgs was too dangerous to ignore. She activated her admin privileges and sent an override to all the children. Sit down, she told Zachary. Zachary sat. His petulant frown stayed, but his eyes had widened a little. The override was a necessary safeguard. These children had been enhanced far beyond the boundaries of normal human evolution. If one or more of them turned violent, no one of his staff would be able to stop them physically. Stand up, she ordered the class. All 19 children stood. Her adrenaline spiked. Her lips twitched in the beginning of a grimace before she caught herself. Slap yourselves, she commanded, in the sternest tone that she could muster. Each of the children slapped themselves in the face with their dominant hand. Again, the old woman ordered. The sound of 19 simultaneous strikes filled the room. Harder! The faces of the children had gone blank as their brain orgs assumed more control. Tears still streaked out a few eyes. Harder! The grace and power far beyond what their tiny bodies should be able to muster. The children struck themselves again. Such a blow should have been enough to leave them unconscious, or at least dazed. But the brain orgs were in control, and they weren't affected by such things. Mrs. Adams barely stifled a wince. Had the tears stopped yet? The old woman's hot gaze bore into her charges. No. 4 of the children still had partial control, enough that their tears hadn't stopped. At least, their noses had started to run. Wipe your noses. The children all wiped their faces with their sleeves. Now slap yourselves again. 7 slaps later, the tears had stopped. 19 tiny faces watched her, devoid of emotion. 19 chests rose and fell in perfect sync. The brain orgs had taken complete control. Mrs. Adams took a breath, steeling herself for the next part. She had her own implant send a message to the school nurse as she pulled a knife from her desk drawer. She walked to the child in the far right corner of the room. Lena, a bouncy little thing with pigtails and a constant toothy grin. She wasn't grinning now. Mrs. Adams held the knife out to the child. Handle first. Take this. Lena gripped the handle, face still blank. Now, children, the teacher's voice cracked. Her brain org offered to control her features for her. Mrs. Adams refused. She knew better than to give the org more control. Her voice was steady as she continued. Lena will use this knife to sever the pointer finger of a dominant hand. Then she'll pass it on to the next student. That student will do the same and pass it on to the next until you've all done it. The last student to remove their finger will return the knife to me. Begin now. Mrs. Adams walked back to the front of the classroom, taking a precious few moments to collect herself while no children were watching. Her org registered a message from the school nurse, who was now waiting outside the classroom. Reattaching the fingers wasn't strictly necessary, as the children's body could regrow a finger in a few days. But the children would need comfort after this, and Mrs. Adams didn't think that she could provide it without breaking down. It was important that her students knew they would be cared for. She wanted them to feel safe if they could. The children finished quickly. There were no screams, not even a frown. Roberto came forward, extending his bloodied knife. She took it carefully, not wanting to inflict another cut, trying not to look at the red liquid dribbling down the stump where his tiny finger had been. Mrs. Adams wiped the knife down with a cloth from her desk, then put it away. Sit down, children. she looked up to find her students at their desks, blank eyes focused on her. The old school teacher's eyes misted over. Those kids had never experienced pain the way they were feeling it now. They could be screaming if they could. "Close your eyes," she told them. She took a moment to wipe the moisture away, taking a deep breath. She could weep later, would, in fact. Mrs. Adams would yell and cry and pound the floor with her fists the second she got home. She would cry for the children and for herself, bitterly wishing the strong arms of Mr. Adams would wrap around her one more time. 30 years, and she missed him every day. She told herself many times that she should move on, but she'd never met anyone, and who would want an old-school teacher anyway. But now wasn't a time for such thoughts. Tonight she would cry and wail. Maybe she'd drink herself sunny and take tomorrow off. But now, right now, she had a lesson to teach. "Children, I know how you feel. It hurts. It hurts and you're scared. You can't move your own body. I know. But I need you to listen to me now. I need you to listen. I need you to understand why this is happening. You have been upgraded. Before you were born, you were given augments, cybernetic gene therapy, a whole bunch of other things you'll learn about later. They make you stronger, faster, and so much smarter than a natural human. You'll be able to do things people like me can barely dream of. We gave you these things because we love you. We want you to live. The universe is so much more dangerous than you know. Twice now we've met other intelligent species. The first, we called them the Takers. They tried to kill us. They wanted to murder your parents and take our worlds for themselves. We fought them off, but it was hard. We lost so many. The second species we called the Screechers. They didn't want our worlds. They wanted us. We were food to them. We weren't enough. They were so fast, so strong. They had technology we'd never seen, could do things we barely imagined. For years and years, they took us. They bred us in farms and ate children just like you. Finally, we found a way to stop them. Augments. We made ourselves more than we were born to be. Our soldiers were finally fast enough to fight. Our scientists built weapons that could hurt them. We made ourselves better and better, until we could finally make the Screechers stop. But augments are dangerous. They come with a price. One we learned too late. Every time you tell your brain orc to take control, it gets a little better at it. It gets more used to running things. When you're hurt or sad or so mad that you can't think, it'll offer to take over. It'll try to help you when you don't know what to do. Do not let it. Every time you let the org take over, it'll be harder to make it let go. Eventually, it won't let go at all. You'll be stuck forever, seeing everything, feeling everything that happens, just like now. And just like now, you won't be able to do anything about it. The org will live your life for you, and because it doesn't feel, it'll do terrible things. That's why you have to be so careful. That's why we have so many therapists and counselors, so many people trying to help. Because those of you who slip through the cracks, who end up hating yourselves, you won't just die or fade away. You'll become monsters. You'll be trapped in your own bodies while the org does unspeakable things. You'll watch yourselves do them to the people you love. I want you to remember this. Your org is recording this, and I want you to review it whenever you feel like giving up. This is the most important lesson I or anyone else will ever teach you. I want you to remember what this feels like, how terrible it is. I want you to remember that it'll happen again if you let it. Mrs. Adams felt her eyes watering again. She let them. She let the children hear the pain in her voice. I'm so sorry that we had to do this to you. I'm sorry that we had to give you the orcs. I'm sorry I made you hurt yourselves. Someday, I hope one of you will find another way. A way that we can keep ourselves safe, that isn't so cruel and dangerous. I don't want, she choked back a sob. I don't want to see you hurt anymore. The teacher took another breath and composed herself before she continued. The override I used to do this to you is temporary. Your brain orcs will grow and learn the same as you do. And in a few years, they'll be too smart for override commands to work. And that's good. But your orcs will learn from you too, and how you use them will change how they treat you and the world. So be careful, and be good where you can. The lesson finished. Mrs. Adams told her classroom of bleeding children to pick up their fingers they'd lost. Some of them would forgive her, some would not. The teacher didn't blame them either way. She knew the org lecture was necessary, but she hated it more than they did. She braced herself as she prepared to shut down the override. The next hour would be chaos, and the rest of the school day would be worse. Mrs. Adams loved to teach. It made her feel important, needed even. She loved her pupils, wanted to help them, to nurture them, and to see them grow. Knowledge was power, and teaching was how she gave that power to the people in her charge. It was usually a joy, but not today. The org lecture always reminded her that knowledge is power, and power comes with a price. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.